Okay, I'm George Yates. Welcome to Justice for All. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be here for the next hour with Norman Reimer. He's the Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All, and every week we try to interview folks that have written books or are instrumental in the legal system in our country, and it helps to enlighten people as to really what goes on in our courts and what's going on in our justice system today. We're really pleased to have Mr. Reimer with us today. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is an organization of which I'm a member. And a lot of your top trial lawyers in the country are, top criminal trial lawyers are. And it's a great organization involved in the education of lawyers, as well as, Mr. Reimer's going to tell you what the NACDL does. And as part of his duties, he's also, of course, the publisher of The Champion, which is the magazine which the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers puts out every month, and which I've got several, I get them every month myself. And Mr. Reimer is an accomplished trial lawyer himself. He spent 25 to 30 years trying cases himself, and has numerous awards, too many to even list, in his experience as a criminal defense lawyer, as an appellate lawyer. He's been honored by the New York State Bar, and I'll talk about some of his accolades. He probably doesn't want to spend this whole hour talking about himself, but I'd like to welcome Norman Reimer to the show. He's the Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. How you doing, Norman?
It's great to be with you. Thank you very much for inviting me on your program.
Well, we've been trying to get you and the president of the NACDL as guests for some time now. You guys are busy guys, and I know we've only got a short time today, so thank you for joining us. For those folks out there that are just riding in their cars or listening to us on a podcast, what is the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and why should it matter? Why should it matter to your average person in America?
Well, those are two great questions. First of all, we are the bar association of the nation's criminal defense bar. So that includes small and solo practitioners. It includes public defenders. It includes private lawyers who do public defense work by court appointment. It also includes military counsel, as well as we have associate members who support the work of criminal defense lawyers, such as investigators and people who work on mitigation. Our principal goals, we've been around for 55, 56 years. Our principal goals are to educate the criminal defense bar, to provide support and resources for the lawyers who practice criminal defense, and perhaps most importantly, to be public policy advocates. And I like to say that we're a sort of a unique organization in that we advocate for fundamental constitutional principles and for a more rational, humane criminal justice system. We don't necessarily advocate for the self-interest of our lawyer members, and that's a very big and important factor. And I'll give you the perfect example. We think there's too much criminalization. We think too many things are prosecuted in this country, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go on. Obviously, that's not necessarily in the best interest of individual lawyers who make a living by representing people who are charged with crime. But we think there are higher goals and higher principles that we have to adhere to, and that's what we try to do. That sort of leads me to your second question, which is, I think you asked, why is it important what we do? Well, the role of the criminal defense lawyer is one of the very, very few occupations that actually appears in the Constitution of the United States. The Sixth Amendment says that all accused persons shall enjoy counsel when they are accused of a crime. And it is a fundamental principle and a most important ingredient of what we are as a country, that the founders of this nation, who got a lot of things wrong, but one of the things they got right was they recognized the importance that every individual, whether they're guilty or not guilty, has the right to have somebody stand with them when the government comes after them. And let's face it, the power to prosecute, which is to condemn, to ruin a reputation, to incarcerate, or even to kill, is probably the most awesome use of power by a government short of warfare. And the idea that you have the right to have somebody with you at that moment is really a precious and important right, and our members are proud to be the champions of justice who ensure that right is a reality.
I realize that I just made that mistake. I make that all the time when I'm trying cases too. It's one of my worst things that I do. I'll ask two questions of the witness. I ask them one, and then I ask them. You're so eager to get the first question answered that you ask the second one. So I asked you two questions at once, and fortunately, you remembered what both questions were. And I always find myself.
I could have objected that it was a compound question.
Exactly. I find myself doing that in court so often, and you end up, or usually you don't notice it while you're doing it. It's later when you're reading the transcript. You say, now, why in the world did I do that? And I never got the answer to my second question. But that is kind of, now I remember what I need to say at the next cocktail party when somebody is putting me down for being a criminal defense attorney. I can say, hey, I'm in the Constitution, so lighten up. But it's true.
Right.
We are in the Constitution.
Exactly. And it's really remarkable. It doesn't say only the innocent. It doesn't say only the maybe innocent. It says everybody, and there's really a very good reason for it. And the reason is, yes, there are some people who are falsely accused. There are some people where the issue of whether or not they're guilty is truly a gray issue, even in their own minds. But there are also people who make mistakes, and I think the founders understood that even people who have made mistakes, who have broken the law, are not irredeemable. People change and they grow, and so they need an advocate so that this terrible thing that happens perhaps at the lowest point of their life doesn't necessarily define the rest of their life.
Well, now, how did you come to the calling of being a criminal defense attorney? You practiced for 28 years before assuming this role with the executive as the executive director. So, were you always a criminal defense lawyer, or did you just
That is a very personal question, and it calls for a very personal answer.
Well, go ahead.
And the answer is that I don't know exactly what it was, but growing up as a very young person, I think even before I was in high school, I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. I thought the idea of defending the underdog, defending the accused, was just something that I felt needed to be done. And so I literally, the entire trajectory of my education was towards that end, and I was very fortunate when I was thinking about going to law school that the school that I was fortunate enough to go to had started one of the first clinical criminal defense programs, so that you could actually, if you got into that program, you spent your third year of law school defending people charged with misdemeanors, of course under supervision and pursuant to a student practice order. And that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was able to do. And that actually led me to an opportunity to go directly into criminal defense practice. And that's what I did for 28 years based in New York until the opportunity to lead NACDL came along.
So what do you tell people when they start trying to put down the fact that you're a criminal defense lawyer? Because there are a lot of people that kind of think criminal defense lawyers are, hey, how can you defend that guilty person, right? I mean, don't you think there's a lot of public perception that the people are guilty and that, how in the world? Go ahead.
Here's my favorite way of answering that question. When I was in practice, I did a lot of training as well, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to do a training program for the police academy in New York. And it was a training program for patrol officers who were looking to become sergeants, or sergeants who were looking to become lieutenants. And they brought me in to talk to them about how they should testify. And of course, the general attitude of police towards defense lawyers is not great. They see them as adversaries. And I would break the ice, when I would get a little hostility by saying, well, let me ask you something. When the Internal Affairs Division comes after you and accuses you of wrongdoing, are you going to call a cop or are you going to call a defense lawyer?
Right, exactly. And that's
the bottom line is we are, as long as we are human, we are fallible and we will make mistakes. And so I say to people, And it's changed, by the way, over the years. This has changed quite a bit, these cocktail party encounters. It used to be, certainly there was a point in time where it's difficult, and you had to try to go back and explain to them the principles I've just talked about. But we are so over-criminalized in this country that you can't talk to a group of people. I don't care who they are. It could be a convention of priests, maybe especially a convention of priests, who haven't had some contact with the criminal law, either themselves, their family members, a relative, a neighbor, a coworker. I mean, we are at this point arresting 14 million people a year in this country. We have 70 million adult Americans who have some kind of criminal record. So, we're long past the idea where the so-called criminals were some small, tiny segment of undefined other. It's everybody.
But doesn't we have a very safe society, don't we? I mean, you go to foreign countries, you worry about your car being stolen, you worry about, don't we have a very safe society as a result of that, or no?
Well, first of all, I think, I'm not sure that there's a correlation between the way we prosecute and what we prosecute for and the safety of society. A lot of these cases that are being prosecuted have nothing to do with public safety. Believe me, as much as I will defend individuals, I have no problem with the idea that we prosecute people who make us less safe or people who steal. The problem is that we use our criminal justice system now as a tool to regulate all kinds of personal, social, and economic behavior.
Well, this is an attack on government at all levels, isn't it? I mean, we've got so many this is where conservatives and liberals are on the same side, right?
Well, we're seeing something in the last few years that is really quite historic. I think NACDL has helped to play a role in bringing that about by reaching out to unlikely allies on the right. And yes, we are seeing now an emerging consensus that the United States criminal justice system is out of control.
And it is interesting that we've seen conservatives want to eliminate the mass incarceration problem because they think it costs too much. Liberals want to stop the mass incarceration problem because they just think that people spend too much time in prison. Conservatives want to eliminate capital punishment because they think it's too expensive. Liberals don't believe in the death penalty. It's amazing how many conservatives and liberals agree on the same things. And, of course, here we are talking about government regulation. We got right-wing people saying too much government regulation. Right. And liberals are saying, yes, there's too much government regulation, certainly in this area. So it is interesting how the right and the left agree on so many things. But the political process keeps the right and the left apart, I guess, for other reasons. Why in the world is it that we aren't able to, or are we making progress on that front?
Well, I think we are making progress. I mean, this is an unusually partisan era in our country, but we are seeing bipartisan collaboration towards reforming the criminal justice system. And on a state-by-state basis, we have seen some important reforms, and they haven't come necessarily in blue states. They've been in red states and purple states. I'm not I don't get into the politics of it, but Rick Perry has done some very progressive things. Kasich has done some progressive things with respect to criminal justice. And I will say this: I want to just put a slightly finer point. I think perhaps it started with the right in looking at the expense, but I do believe, based on a number of the statements and the folks that I work with, that there actually is a recognition not only that it's too expensive, that it's a waste of money, but that we're actually harming society. That there is a point in time where if you incarcerate too many people for too many things that don't present a risk to public safety, you are actually doing more harm to society than you're doing good.
Well,
so I think that's an encouraging sign.
Well, now you mentioned politics. Hasn't politics played a big role in this with Congress for many years trying to restrict the power of judges, mandatory sentences, sentencing guidelines, all that?
There's no question whatsoever that we got into this mess as a result of politicians exploiting the issue. It is not a red or blue problem. It is not a Democratic or Republican problem. It's an American problem. We have some of the worst of the criminal justice actions and that have led to mass incarceration happened under the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton has admitted that now. We have seen a bipartisan hysteria that led to this, and it's going to take a bipartisan effort to undo it.
The question of the day really is on this mass incarceration, in my view, because there's a lot of articles on it. That really this talk about nonviolent drug offenders is not going to solve the problem, because when you really start crunching the numbers, that's a significant minority of who's actually incarcerated in America, and not to mention that at the federal level. So really on a statewide level across the country, we've got a lot of people in there, not just nonviolent, they're violent people that have been locked up. So how do you eliminate the mass incarceration problem and still let people feel it? Because you're going to have to release a lot of people that have been convicted of violent crimes, aren't you?
Absolutely, and we're very much involved in the in working in a project called Clemency Project 2014, which is in response to the administration's clemency initiative, which is primarily limited to nonviolent offenders. It is limited to nonviolent offenders, but I will say, and I have said, and will continue to say, that we need to extend that program to people who were convicted of violent crimes. Now, let me tell you why I say that, and why I say that confident that it doesn't pose a threat to public safety. Many of the people, if not most of the people, who have been locked up for violent crimes are locked up when they're very young. They're either in their teens or in their 20s.
Early 20s.
Early 20s. Maybe mid-20s. Mm-hmm. The fact is, and this I keep coming back to this, people change, people mature, people grow up. We know now that the mental health science has shown that the brain is still developing until people are 25 years old, especially the higher levels dealing with judgment. So, my answer is, my view, quite frankly, is that anybody who has been incarcerated, let's say at least for non-capital offenses, after 20 years, they should be reviewed and considered for release. One of the things, as I work through these clemency applications, that is just absolutely astonishing to me is the number of people who were given sentences of 10, 20, 30 years or life. They had horrific records going in before the conviction that has put them there for this long period of time. And yet, time after time, I'm seeing cases where people have been in a federal prison for 10 years or more with literally no violations whatsoever. And, I ask, for people who aren't in prison, can you say you haven't broken any law, gotten any summons, gotten any kind of tickets in 10 or 20 years? These people are living in the most difficult of circumstances, but they've changed. And so this obsession with giving out these horrific sentences is ill-considered. You at least should give people the opportunity to show that over the period of time from when they're in their 20s to their 30s to their 40s, that they're a different person.
And what's the incentive to them to be good in prison if they're going to be stuck there without any possibility of parole? No wonder they get in trouble when they're in prison. If they don't, what's the point? They can't get parole. They're stuck.
Well, that's the amazing thing to me. I think that there is a tendency for people to want to make the most of their life, and after a period of time, they outgrow the immaturity and the lack of judgment, which so often leads to so much of this stuff. Now, look, I'm not talking about homicidal individuals, mass killers. I mean, there is a certain very tiny minority of the human race that is going to commit serious crimes, and nothing's going to change that. But that's not what's filling up our jails. That's not why we have 2.1 million people in jail in this country. That's not who they are.
Right. Well, now, I was talking with a lawyer buddy of mine the other day about, now, is it South Carolina that has a program that says that the judge retains jurisdiction over that case as long as that person remains in prison, and has the right to review that case yearly or over at any time, and therefore that person can be on his good behavior and be reviewed regularly. And
well, I'm not familiar with the program. But I'll tell you, anything that affords people the opportunity to be reviewed and get out early is something I support.
Yeah, because if you could just say, and I think one of the problems we've got, of course, is if somebody does commit a horrible crime of, let's say, a murder, you have to send the message to the victims and the local. That's why you have to give them a life term. But even that person should be subject to, okay, fine, you've got your pound of flesh. Certainly the news media can print it. The politicians can go to school on it if they have to. But then, whatever, 5, 10, 15 years, they've done their time. I remember back in the day when I was a prosecutor, we had parole in Virginia, and on a first-degree murder charge, you were eligible for parole after 15 years. Now, a lot of people didn't get it, but they were first-time eligible at 15 years. Now, like you were talking about, you got some 19, 20-year-old kid whose brain wasn't fully developed. He shoots somebody, whatever, kills somebody, a terrible crime. Now he's 35, 36, and you're saying he shouldn't, he got the life term. Why can't you review now he's 37 years old. He's a completely different person. Why shouldn't that be reviewed and maybe allow him some release? And that's what we're talking about, aren't we?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's just the fundamental notion that people are capable of changing.
And they do change, and we find these people, and yet under our current rules in Virginia, there's no parole. If someone gets that life term at 20, it's geriatric city. They're not going to be eligible till they're 65. Now, what in the world are you doing incarcerating a 50-year? It's one thing. Okay, maybe you're not going to let him out at 37, but 40, 45?
Right. Well,
50? You're going to keep him in when he's in his 50s for something that he did when he was 19? I mean, that's when you're really starting to talk about, now, what are you doing? This man is not a threat to anybody, and the people that he might have harmed certainly are long gone. Are they still coming to the parole board and saying we don't want him released? I mean, there's certainly, and victims do have the right to have input into this as well, perhaps. But even, and maybe that's what we need to have as part of this review process, and see whether the victims come in and say, gee, Judge, we don't care. We think he's done his time. I mean, why don't we have a system like that statewide, countrywide?
Well, I think, that's it's going to take a profound change in attitudes, but I think we may be at the beginning of that. We've at NACDL we've also tackled another problem, which is the problem of collateral consequences. Those are the hidden penalties and the silent sentences that are inflicted upon people. They're not part of the actual sentence, but there are so many. I think the ABA has done an inventory and come up with more than 50,000 of these things.
Now, what's a collateral consequence?
So these are the things that happen to people as a result of having a criminal record.
Oh, right.
So it may be the loss of family rights, the loss of immigration rights. A legal resident can be deported as a result of a conviction, and notwithstanding the fact that they may have never lived anywhere else. You have impact on employment, impact on voting rights, on gun ownership, one after the other, and with 70 million people with criminal records, that's 70 million people that are laboring under what we call these collateral consequences.
Not to mention their families and the children that grow up without fathers and occasionally mothers. And
that's, of course, if they're incarcerated. But I'm talking about the ability to make a living, the ability to get beyond the mistake that they made. And actually, believe it or not, there's even consequences for people who get arrested and don't get convicted. We did a study on this called Collateral Damage, where we had hearings around the country, and the stories that you hear are just unbelievable. People's criminal docket sheets being sold. And people can't ever get behind even an arrest that didn't lead to a conviction.
Yeah, and I get people all the time that they do get that arrest and they want to get it expunged and that sort of thing because they don't even want to have that even going down as an arrest. If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All, and I'm here with Norman Reimer. He's the Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the NACDL it's called. We're going to take a short break here in just a minute, and we're going to be back with Norman Reimer to talk about the NACDL and the state of criminal justice in America today. I'm kind of interested in talking about this, the police, I guess the flavor of the month really now is police killing unarmed black men around the country, violence by police against unarmed civilians, and of course the expanding use of body cameras, I think, which we're going to start seeing. I wonder if the NACDL has a position on that. So we're going to be right back after a short break here with Norman Reimer and talk about some of these other issues. Stay with us. This is Justice for All.
Don't wait until the last minute to get your kids or grandkids enrolled in school this fall. If finances are holding you back, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several of the schools in the area, and we are offering a 35% discount off tuition. We have seats ranging from preschool through the 12th grade. Call us today at 488-1010 or visit our website, thewordandpraise.org, to find out more. Don't let your seat be taken this fall.
Good Italian food, daily specials, and a place people enjoy is Spaghetti Eddie's. Indulge in your mouth-watering pizza, pasta, subs, salads, appetizers, and desserts. Open 7 days a week. Log on to SpaghettiEddiesPizzaCafe.com and visit them at Taylor Road and on Eden Way North in Chesapeake for lunch and dinner. Like them on Facebook. Italian food you can count on is at Spaghetti Eddie's.
Don't wait until the last minute to get your kids or grandkids enrolled in school this fall. If finances are holding you back, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several of the schools in the area, and we are offering a 35% discount off tuition. We have seats ranging from preschool through the 12th grade. Call us today at 488-1010 or visit our website, thewordandpraise.org, to find out more. Don't let your seat be taken this fall.
Spring is back, and so are the Norfolk Tides. Catch the fun and excitement as your Norfolk Tides take the field at beautiful Harbor Park. Bring your friends and family to root on the Orioles of tomorrow today. Log on to NorfolkTides.com for information on season tickets, groups, ticket discounts, and Tides merchandise. Follow the Tides on Twitter and Facebook for updates on promotions and player moves. Tides Baseball, minor leagues, major fun.
Do you want your children to not only sing, but to know that Jesus is their superhero? Then check out Grace Child Development Center, a child care center intent on positively impacting the Denby area of Newport News by investing in the next generation. Grace Child Development Center's goal is to partner with parents in preparing children for life. With flex and part-time options, low teacher-to-student ratios, and flexible financial policies, this is the perfect place for 2.5 to 5-year-olds from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Check out their website at denbykids.org. That's denbykids.org. Or call 719-1488. That's 757-719-1488. And your child will learn that Jesus truly is their superhero.
Jesus, you're my superhero.
Justice for All. And we're back with Norman Reimer, the Executive Director of the NACDL. And thank you for staying with us. I know you as the Director of the NACDL, what are your favorite projects that you're working on right now as far as advancing either in any area that you're, what's your favorite thing you're working on right now, Norman?
Well, to some extent, it's like asking, a parent which of the children are their favorites. So I don't like to single anyone out over another, but I'll mention a couple just because they're very, very timely. We have a major initiative to try to improve the quality of indigent defense. That refers to the system by which we provide lawyers for people who can't afford them in criminal cases, and we're at the point now where about 80% of all the people who are charged with crime depend upon some form of appointed counsel. And unfortunately, while the right is guaranteed in the Constitution, and the famous Gideon case back in 1963 held that in all felonies, if you're too poor to have a lawyer, to hire a lawyer, you're entitled to have one appointed, and that's been extended to many misdemeanors. The reality is that the Supreme Court, neither the Supreme Court nor Congress, ever provided a funding mechanism for this. So it's left to the states, and in many states the systems don't even exist, or if they do, they're a mess.
We're really underfunded here, but we've gone to the public defenders' offices in many of the jurisdictions. That definitely has improved the quality of representation. But the problem with that is, of course, these poor public defenders are overwhelmed with cases. So they're
right.
And they're not paid as well as the prosecutors are because they don't get it seems like prosecutors will get money from the state and from localities, and public defenders are still underpaid.
There's lack of parity where you do have public defenders. They get paid less than prosecutors. They don't have the same resources. And when you're depending upon appointed counsel, the rate of compensation is oftentimes embarrassingly low. You can't even cover your overhead with it. So this is one of the big areas that we have been working on. We've put out a number of reports, and we're actually going to be, right after Labor Day, we're going to release a major report, which is the result of 2 years of study of the federal indigent defense system, which generally has been considered to be a model worth emulating. But I think I don't want to telegraph the findings, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done there as well in order to ensure that system remains strong and vibrant.
Right.
The other thing that we've been looking at is we've been looking at different ways of addressing racial and ethnic disparity in the criminal justice system. In fact, we did a major symposium where we partnered with a number of groups, including the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys and the Brennan Center, the Center for New Leadership, and a county bar in New York, and had a 3-day symposium looking at all different aspects of the system and where and how. We accepted, everybody accepted as a given that there is this racial and ethnic disparity, and this focused on how we can try to address it. Everything from charging and plea bargaining and sentencing and bail, the setting of bail. There's so many different ways in which, whether it's intentional or not, the criminal justice system is imposing far greater burdens on minorities.
Well, when I was interviewing Cheney Mason, who's a veteran criminal defense lawyer from Florida, he represented... I
know him well.
Yeah, what a great guy. And I asked him kind of the same question I asked you, why did you become a criminal defense lawyer? He said, well, when I was coming along, I always hated bullies, he said. So, and I think that there's all of us that are criminal defense lawyers kind of feel like we're kind of helping the underdog, the government's kind of the bully and we're kind of helping the little guy. We're the guys that, when we turn on the game, we're the team that's got the, that's favored to win. You're always rooting for the underdog. I mean, it's kind of, sort of American to kind of root for the underdog, I think. It's kind of, and I noticed from your whole resume that you've been doing that forever with this indigent defense services stuff. You've been, you actually, I was reading your resume and you fought against the state and city of New York, and sued on behalf of indigent litigants. Tell us about that. So this has been a fight of yours for a long time for, to helping the little guy.
Well, I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, that was a very, very interesting lawsuit we brought. I guess it was in the early 2000s in New York State, which relied heavily upon appointed counsel. They paid $40 an hour for in-court work and $25 an hour for out-of-court work. It hadn't been raised in a generation. And it simply was impossible to attract sufficient cadre of qualified lawyers. So, on behalf of, it was an interesting lawsuit. We brought it on behalf. As
late as 2000, in the state of New York, an indigent lawyer was making $60 an hour.
No, not 60. $40 an hour for in-court, $25 for out-of-court. Which is, first of all, the idea of a distinction is ludicrous, because as well as I, as a practicing lawyer, the work you do out of court is no less important than the work you do in court, maybe as important.
And in court is usually just a short period of time. The vast majority of the time you spend is going to be out of court. So at $25 an hour, you can't even keep the lights on in the office, much less pay a secretary or... It's crazy.
Well, we brought a lawsuit and we succeeded. We had to, we went up to the High Court in New York on whether or not there was a cause of action. Or actually went up to the appellate division in New York, the middle level court, came back down, and then we had a trial and won the trial, and eventually it was settled because we got the legislature to raise the rates. So, but that was a temporary fix. The rates haven't been raised since, and this is the kind of thing that we're fighting in state after state, county after county. And again, most states don't even have a statewide system for indigent defense. In Texas, for example, there's 250 some odd counties, I think. They have 250 some odd approaches to it. And no statewide, no sustainable statewide funding stream that covers all of it. So, it's a battle, and you got to keep fighting it.
Well, now, how many? You're the executive director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and you say we battle. How does the NACDL go about battling? Do you do it through the individual lawyers? Do you? How do you go about doing this procedurally?
That's great question. There are several different ways that we do it. One of the things that we do is through training and education, not just through our regular seminars, but increasingly we are providing scholarship money through various grants that we have and through our own internal fundraising to enable public defenders, be they in a public defender office or an assigned attorney working in an assigned counsel program, to get to these training programs. And we're doing targeted trainings. We're going to specific regions of the country where there's a need, and we're delivering the training right there at no cost. So we've got one coming up in 2 weeks that we're going to do in Syracuse, where there's a big problem with some of the upstate counties in New York. We did one out in Seattle brought in people from all over the state of Washington. So training and education for the lawyers themselves is part of it. The other thing is we are studying the problems, and we're issuing a number of reports that highlight the issue so that we can get traction for either legislative reform or ultimately litigation. We're going to go into several states over the next year or two, study the systems, issue reports, and where there are flaws, we're going to try to get them corrected. Again, either by getting the legislatures and the governors to act, or if necessary, by supporting litigation.
Now, I just before the break, I was talking about cameras on cops, and I noticed that in I think it was the June issue of the Champion, and I noticed that you are the publisher of the Champion, which is the NACDL magazine. And first of all, does the NACDL have a website that anybody can go on to, or do you have to be a lawyer to go on to that?
No. We have most of the important work on the public policy side that we do is all accessible to the public. The website is www.nacdl.org. You can surf around the website by going to that homepage, or you can put in /reports, and you can read all of the various reports that we've been issuing over the last number of years that tackle a lot of different subjects.
Now, is the NACDL involved at all in this latest problem with cops and body cameras and all? What's your position on that? Have you got anything to say about that? We talked about that before the break.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of ways that we've been involved.
Because there's an issue right now. Because I know that we were talking about this the other day. There was an issue as to what does happen with these videos. Let's say the cops do have the cameras on them, and there is a video of the incident, which, of course, we've noticed that some of these videos are very telling, and without them, we might not have a prosecution. But what's going to happen going forward with these cameras, and who gets to view them? Who possesses the video? Can cops look at the video before they issue their reports? To what extent? I know that's a question that we were talking about last week.
Right. So we tend to take a deliberate and thoughtful approach to some of these issues. And generally speaking, we do have a policy. We support. We certainly support the Black Lives Matter movement. As I've said, we've been concerned about disparity in the criminal justice system for quite a long time, and we try to address it. In the wake of the various cases that got publicity, the tragedies with these people getting killed, we did a series of webinars on over-militarization of police and on grand jury practice to highlight some of the abuses that we feel have taken place. But on this specific issue of body cameras, which in general we support, we actually have a task force right now that is working on developing a comprehensive policy. And, so in some sense I'm going to dodge your question because our policy will be articulated probably within the next 3 months or so. So I don't want to prejudge it. But I will acknowledge that there are some very serious issues about all of this. On the one hand, obviously, you want to be able to see what happened so that you can't have a fabrication after the fact by police. By the same token, I think there are legitimate privacy concerns, and we need to think about that. How do we monitor this? How do we regulate it? Do we want every single encounter with the police to be monitored and to be recorded? And then there's the question, which I think you're alluding to, which is how long are these tapes stored? How can you get access to them if you're the defense? How can we prevent them from being misused for an improper purpose? So, while I think there's a general sentiment, I think our board, is generally supportive of the idea. We are going to try to really delve into some of these details and make a real contribution to the debate that's going on.
Yeah, because this was in your June issue, of which you're the publisher, and Ted Simon. Now he's no longer the president of the NACDL. Right, you got a new president.
Right. I think he wrote a nice column in which he identified some of these issues.
He really did, and it's one that I'm going to go ahead and mention some of the issues that Ted Simon mentioned as far as this body cameras, because on the one hand you think, oh, that's a panacea for everything. If there's a camera, that'll tell the truth. But then we've got all these other issues like, well, let's see, the cops come walking in your house to see whether or not, you've got whose car is parked out in front of your house, or some innocent little thing, and they come walking in your house, and now it's all being filmed. Is the camera running 24/7? And should the police capture noise complaints, arguments between neighbors, friendly interactions with the public? Everything you do with the cops is being videoed. Do you have the right to know that? There are legitimate privacy issues, and you
have to think. You also have to look long term. I mean, we're just one step away now. I mean, they have these facial recognition techniques now. So what happens when that's part of the body camera capability as well? So now you're going to be developing this entire database. I mean, most people would feel like they don't want to give up their DNA. They don't want to give up their fingerprints. Certainly if they haven't done anything. But now you may have a similar type of tool where you're collecting this data on everybody. So, I mean, there are a lot of interesting questions here, and I'm hoping that we'll come up with something that really addresses them with care and also with some foresight as to where this could all lead.
Yeah, because especially in light of this most recent incident, this Ashley Madison, which been all the papers, now hackers are able to get into the servers of these very sensitive sites, and Ashley Madison, of course, is the site, the infidelity site. But I was listening to a podcast by Dan Carlin, who was talking about what if somebody just releases, hackers go out and release everyone's internet records in the entire world, just releases them all, and everybody's privacy is opened up. And so we start seeing this camera thing, and now people realize that their privacy is being less and less. I mean, there's cameras everywhere, and now there's going to be cameras on the police. So it's going to be a real interesting, and you've got a comprehensive task force that's working on that right now with the pros and cons. When you release your report, what effect will that have? Is this going to be a policy statement then that would be maybe,
we will issue the report publicly, and that will then, first of all, it will guide our advocacy, and hopefully, as with all of these other projects that we've worked on, it will contribute to the discussion. We're in a great position with our organization now, where I think a lot of policymakers, a lot of legislators, and executive branch officials turn to us for our input. I think we're perceived as being fairly principled, honest brokers. Looking, as I said, to protect fundamental constitutional rights. And I think that it just gives us another opportunity to be a thoughtful voice in these discussions. But you can't get there unless you look at it, you study it, and you develop a clear policy. And like I said, I mean, it's clear that without these videos of some of these horrific episodes, the narrative would have been quite different.
Absolutely.
And so you can't lose sight of the importance of this tool. First, as to expose the truth, to identify the truth, and also perhaps to deter improper conduct. It's just that that you got to look at it in the context of lots of other issues as well.
Well, now, how long have you been at the helm of the NACDL?
I've been here since late 2006.
So, and as the executive director, that pretty much puts you in charge of the day-to-day operations, because the presidents sort of come and go. They serve for 1 year. They're usually top lawyers, top criminal defense lawyers around the country who take a turn as president. And some of the top names in the country, of course, have been the president.
Yep.
And you stay on, so you manage the day-to-day while the presidents come and go.
That's correct.
How many?
I came to it from a very unique position. I had I mentioned, and you've mentioned my involvement in New York. I was the president of a bar association there, so I've been on the other side of this, where I was the president, and then there was the professional staff. I will say this: although they only serve for a year, the way it works here, they're generally in the executive committee leadership for several years. And I see part of my job, actually, is to make sure that each one of them has a singularly rewarding experience during the year that they're the president. And the other thing to remember is that, I'm the day-to-day, operating officer that runs the place, but we look to our board and our leaders to develop the policies. And so this, just you mentioned on the body cam thing, that's a task force that Ted Simon appointed as president. They will take their recommendations to our board. That will be the policy, which I will then be advocating.
How many members are in the NACDL?
We have approximately 9,200 direct members, and we have affiliates in many states and counties. And the last time we did a count is probably about 40,000 of them.
Now, you were a professor of law for many years, I see, and do you miss being a professor of law, or you like this job a little bit better?
Well, to be fair, and maybe the nuance, it may not be so important to your listeners, I was an adjunct professor. So, in other words, I was still practicing, and I was teaching a course, a skills course on trial advocacy. And I do miss that, actually. I enjoyed that tremendously. I also miss practice. But this particular position, as I said at the time, this is the only position I would have considered leaving practice for, because while this is a magnificent opportunity to serve the defense bar, to serve the Constitution, and to promote reform, there really is nothing, as I think you know, that is more ennobling than to stand in the well of the court with a single individual whose life has been entrusted to you.
Well,
and to me, there's no greater honor that anyone, certainly anybody in the legal profession, can have than to represent an accused person.
Well, thanks, because that's what I do all the time myself. Sometimes it's a tough job when you're having to deal with.
It's tough. People can be difficult. They come with lots of baggage, lots of problems. But it's that fundamental notion that there you are. You're the only thing standing between them and the full power of the government.
I might be treading on thin ice here, but maybe you don't want to go out on a limb. But what do you think about the state of the judiciary in the country today? Do you think we've got? Do you like the way the judges are handling cases? I mean, in general, and how would you feel? What would be your recommendation to improve the judiciary in America today? If that's too broad a question, you can certainly address it any way you like.
Well, I'm going to qualify it simply by saying I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the organization. But the organization has identified some problems as well. I frankly think that we need a judiciary that's strong and independent and courageous, and oftentimes we don't see that. And we did a study on the issue of disclosing favorable evidence, what is called Brady material. Lawyers will know what that means. Lay people won't. But basically, the Supreme Court has said that there's a duty to disclose information which is favorable to the accused or unfavorable to the prosecution's case.
And the prosecution gets to decide, as usually, but us defense lawyers don't get it. They say, the prosecutors can decide whether or not it's exculpatory or not, and sometimes
well, that's right. And we issued we came out with a report about a year or so ago called "Material Indifference: How Courts Are Impeding Fair Disclosure in Criminal Cases." And again, you just go to nacdl.org/reports, and you can find it there. And what we did was we studied cases over a 5-year period in which the issue of Brady violations came up. And what we found, and the reason why it's entitled "How Courts Are Impeding Fair Disclosure in Criminal Cases," note it says how courts are impeding, not prosecutors. And what we found was that because the standard that the Supreme Court has set for a reversal is whether or not the material that was withheld was material to the outcome, increasingly you find the courts bending over backwards to say after the fact, well, it wasn't material. So in essence, you're incentivizing prosecutors to not turn it over, gambling that when the case goes up on appeal, even though they violated the duty to turn it over, the courts will say it's not material. So my answer to your question is there are some
they call it harmless error.
Well, it's a form. Yes, that's what it is. But in this particular case, it's a specific kind of harmless error. And we've proposed legislation that would take out the materiality standard and make it an absolute that it has to be turned over.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that there are some fantastic judges in this country, gutsy judges. So many of the rights that we have we wouldn't have if it weren't for the judges who have gone out on a limb. But we also have a judiciary that tends to be much of the judiciary comes from the prosecution bar. They tend to have a prosecution mentality, and that's a problem.
And certainly in our area, your chances of being reappointed by the legislature go up if you've taken a law and order approach. Norman, we're going to probably have to go here in about a minute. Is there anything else that you can enlighten us with that we haven't had a chance to discuss? I know we could go on much longer, but you've got to go. I know you got a busy schedule.
Go
ahead.
I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, to talk about the issues that are important to us, to talk about NACDL. And the only thing I would say to your listeners is I hope that people will care about the criminal justice system. Look at it, understand it, and be engaged. We've gotten to a problem, with mass incarceration and all the things we've talked about during this hour. It's up to the people to fix it by letting their representatives know that these issues are important to them.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Norman Reimer, Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Thank you.
All right, well, that'll do it for today's show, and thanks again to Norman Reimer for being with us today. This is George Yates with Justice for All. Every week we discuss legal issues relating to the justice system in America. Most of the time, sometimes we talk about sports, but I try to talk with a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am. So it's great to be with Mr. Reimer today. He's really an interesting guest, Executive Director of the NACDL, which is a group of which I'm a member. Please join us again next week. This is Justice for All. I'm George Yates. Have a great day. Bye now.